I was on set and we were just about to roll. The interviewee was settled and the client was ready to start the interview. I went to make the final adjustments to the lighting, and in the process of moving towards the key light, bumped into my photography tripod, which then proceeded to hit the deck along with my B camera. Fair to say, everyone in the room was a bit shocked. Not my finest moment. Hey, I'm Ben, and in my 10 years working as a director of photography, I've made plenty of mistakes. Here are 3 of the biggest mistakes I've made so that you don't have to. Buying gear I didn't need. Our roles as directors of photography can get very gear focused. With a new piece of gear being released every few months, it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting the latest and greatest. I bought so many things that I used only a handful of times before the piece of equipment sits on the shelf and collects dust. I bought the Cinemate doozy slider for a job which only required a few slider shots. I literally used it for 3 or 4 shoots, and then it sat on the shelf for years to come before I parted ways with it only a few years ago. This unused equipment loses you money in the long term as its value depreciates over time. The rule of thumb that I use now is that I only really buy equipment that will make my life easier on set and more efficient. I recently bought myself the Fuji 18-55mm kit lens. I was about to go traveling overseas and didn't want to spend time changing lenses. The lens ticked all the boxes. It had a good focal range, it was lightweight, and had optical image stabilization. It's now become the perfect location scouting lens for my Fuji stills camera. Now, if there's a piece of equipment that I don't think I'll use often, I'll rent it unless it makes more sense to buy it outright. Not enough practice. There will be times that you'll have to use a camera that you're not familiar with. In these times, it's best to do as much research as you can. Or better yet, try and get the camera in your hands prior to the shoot. Early on in my career, I volunteered my time to film some presentations for an event. The production had rented E&G style cameras that I hadn't worked with before. I pulled the camera out of the case on the day of the shoot and tried to get as familiar as I could with it before we started rolling. Going through all the settings, everything seemed fine, but I noticed that the viewfinder was a little noisier than I was expecting, but thought it was just the way that the viewfinder functioned. Halfway through the production, I realized that there was an auto gain function that had been active for the entire duration that I'd been filming up until that point. We were filming presentations in low light, so it was only natural for the camera to crank the gain up. So the noise in the viewfinder that I was seeing wasn't strong levels of peaking, but it was actual noise on the footage. Definitely not my finest moment, and the client definitely wasn't impressed. Forgot to hit record. As silly as this is, it can definitely happen. Once in a blue moon, you'll think that you're recording just to realize that the camera or audio recorder wasn't recording at all. It's a horrifying and anxiety-inducing moment when it happens. I was on a shoot doing a lot of single line deliveries to camera. I was using a mirrorless camera and recording sound to an audio recorder. For one of the talent we were filming, I hit record on the audio recorder and I thought I'd hit record on the camera as well. But it turned out that that was not the case. Fortunately, I'd realized only after the first few takes. And since I had a really good rapport with the client, I'd let them know what had happened and they were very understanding. We grabbed the pickups for the bits that I'd missed and continued on with the shoot. I now make sure that I see that red record is on the screen before I let the director know that we're good to go. From these mistakes, I've developed systems to make sure that they don't happen in the future. When I see an announcement of a new fancy piece of gear, I make sure that it's a need, not a want. If I'm using a piece of gear that I've never used before, I make sure to get hands-on with it before the shoot, just to make sure that I'm comfortable with the operation of the piece of gear. And lastly, before I let the director know that we're ready to go, I double check to see if the camera is well and truly recording. Each and every production that you work on is a learning experience. You'll make mistakes along the way, and that's totally normal. It's all a part of the learning experience. Even after 10 years working in the industry, I'm still learning. I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever made a big mistake. What did you learn from it? What do you do now to avoid it in future? Thanks for watching, and until next time, don't forget to hit record.